What's up, YouTube? This is your boy John from the Jersey Shore, and I am back with you today to give you my review of the 1994 film Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Wes Craven's New Nightmare was both written and directed by the master of horror himself, Wes Craven. Given the title of this movie, it would have been very strange if it wasn't. Starring Heather Langenkamp, Miko Hughes, and of course, Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger.
Where's my son?
So this was the final installment in the original run of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And this one was very different. It was a very fresh idea. It's actually Heather Langenkamp as Heather Langenkamp. And it's Robert Englund as Robert Englund. Heather Langenkamp has a little boy. She's married. And this movie is supposed to be a depiction of her real life after she did the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. In this movie, she has been receiving telephone calls from a very familiar voice that you all know and love. But she's been battling against that, and she has not been telling people about this. And then she gets notified that Wes Craven is in fact creating another Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And he is trying to get her to be in the movie, to agree to the terms of the movie, be in the movie. He's writing the script. But he also seems to be having issues with getting phone calls and hearing, seeing things that, very Freddy Krueger-like. But in this movie, Heather Langenkamp, also in real life, Heather Langenkamp is married to a special effects artist. But in this movie, Wes Craven has hired Heather Langenkamp's husband to create a new Freddy Krueger glove. Not only is Heather Langenkamp and Wes Craven, not only are Heather Langenkamp and Wes Craven experiencing strange incidences where Freddy Krueger may or may not be involved, so is Robert Englund, which I thought was also a really cool twist. Robert Englund seems to be distracted by something that is very Freddy Krueger-like. And we also learn that Heather Langenkamp's son, Dylan, he's also being disturbed by something. At a few different points in the movie, he's saying things, he's singing the 1-2 Freddy's Coming For You song that the little girls sing when they're playing jump rope. He's seeing things and he's saying things that there's no way in the world that this little boy should even know about. Something's going on. It's actually pretty neat. Heather Langenkamp is interacting with Robert Englund and referring to him as Robert because he's not Freddy Krueger in this movie. He is, but he isn't, if you know what I mean. If you've seen this, you know exactly what I mean. You see Robert Englund as himself, with no makeup on, just as Robert. Then you also see Robert Englund in this movie as Freddy. But you also see Heather Langenkamp as Heather Langenkamp, but at one point in the movie, she basically has to revert back to being Nancy in order to have any measure of success against battling Freddy Krueger. Now, I've been bashing these movies pretty thoroughly for the last 3 reviews I've done, Part 4, Part 5, and Part 6. Wasn't crazy about 2, wasn't crazy about 3, but 4, 5, and 6 were absolute train wrecks of a movie. All 3 of them were just terrible in their own right. I actually enjoyed this movie. This movie, it was such a fresh, different idea, and I've said in previous videos that I thought that I remembered a few details about this movie, and I was right. The parts that I thought I remembered, actually did remember, and I did enjoy it. This is the first time that I've watched this movie. It's got to be 20 years or more since I've seen any of this movie. But it was very different, and I think that is why I remembered it. I remembered it being different. I thought that Freddy Krueger's look was really cool in this movie. I wasn't real crazy about the fact that Freddy has a green hat and wears leather pants in this movie. I wasn't real nuts about that. The new claw or glove was really cool, which is actually more like part of his body now. It's not so much a claw as it is an extension of him. I thought that the idea of Wes Craven being in the movie as Wes Craven, and Robert Englund and Heather Langenkamp as themselves was such a different idea. And of course, it took Wes Craven to pull this thing out of the fire. The Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, for me, in my opinion, took a complete and total nosedive, went right off the cliff, whatever way you want to put it. The first 3 movies were a pass. The second 3 movies were a complete and total failure. This movie was good. I enjoyed it. Parts 4, 5, and 6 were not funny. The sad thing about that, or the bad thing about that, the negative knock on that, is that they were supposed to be funny. Freddy was supposed to be a goofy one-liner clown in those movies, and it wasn't funny. The writing was terrible. He wasn't funny. He wasn't scary. In this movie, Freddy is actually different. His presence on screen is completely different than it was in those 3 movies, and it works. This movie was not funny. It was not supposed to be funny, and that's a good thing. There was one scene in this movie that completely drove me crazy. There's a scene where Dylan, the little boy, sleepwalks, and he goes up and he's walking out onto a highway. And as he's walking out onto that highway, you see a giant Freddy Krueger claw or glove, whatever you want to refer to it as, a giant Freddy hand come down and scoop him up by the back of his pajamas, and he's carrying him over a highway. It's absolutely ridiculous. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, here we go. The movie's getting ready to go off the cliff again. But it kind of wheeled itself back in. I understood. Listen, these movies are not going to get completely away from that at this point, I don't believe. Another thing that kind of bothered me is there's a scene towards the end of the movie where Freddy is trying to catch this little boy Dylan, and he's reaching inside of like a boiler, or it almost looks like a crematorium of some sort. But he opens the door and he leans into this thing, and he's stretching his arm out to try and reach this little boy, and his arm is stretching, which means his body can transform. So if his body can transform, why doesn't he just go to hell in there and get this kid? It doesn't make any logical sense whatsoever. But those are really my only knocks. The hat, the leather pants, the giant Freddy, and the why does his arm stretch and he just can't stretch and go in there and get this kid. Whatever. But if they're the only knocks that I can have on this movie, so be it, I'll take it. Another thing that this movie did that I actually liked was, back in the very first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, the scene where Nancy's friend, I believe her name was Tina, is murdered. She's cut up in the bed. She's drug up the wall. She's drug into the middle of the ceiling and dropped down onto the bed. It's extremely bloody. It's probably my favorite scene, I'd say, easily, in the entire history of this franchise. And they do it again in this movie. They just reenact it with a different character in a different setting, with sort of a different Freddy. It's like a fresh take on what worked in the first movie. I wasn't real crazy about Miko Hughes in this movie either. He was the kid. You absolutely will recognize him if you've ever seen Pet Sematary, the original Pet Sematary. He's the little blonde kid who played Gage. He's not blonde in this movie. He's got brown hair in this movie. And it took me a couple seconds to realize why I knew this kid. I knew right away I recognized him, but he's a little bit older in this, so it took me a few minutes to put that together in my mind. But that's who this kid is. I don't want to knock him too hard because he's a kid. Kids are kids. He's not going to be, Robert De Niro or Al Pacino in this movie. But for some reason that kid just bothered me. I wasn't real crazy about this kid in this movie. Heather Langenkamp, on the other hand, I thought was fantastic in this movie. I loved her in the first movie. I thought she was all right in the third movie. She's fantastic in this movie as well, portraying herself as well as portraying her character, Nancy. I thought it was really good. Like I said, it was just a very fresh take on these characters with these actors. And this was very necessary to bring this thing back, to breathe new life into this series. It kind of surprised me that they actually made, and I'm not saying it was a wrong idea to do this, but they breathed new life into this franchise and then end it. They don't make any more movies. I know the way that Hollywood likes to beat a dead horse, and breathing new life into this franchise, which was just pop culture icon Freddy Krueger. Now that they actually put a good product on screen again, it surprised me that they didn't make any more of these. So after all the complaining that I've done with the Dream Master and the Dream Child and Freddy's Dead, this movie was actually enjoyable to watch. I had a good time watching this movie. So I guess the Nightmare on Elm Street series as a whole, I guess, is a win. I like the first 3 and I like the 7th, so that's 4-3 at this point. So I would say overall, if you enjoy the Freddy Krueger movies, if you have enjoyed them up to this point, you definitely will enjoy this one. This was a good movie, man. Wes Craven's New Nightmare. If you haven't seen it, check it out. I strongly suggest it. All right, folks, that's going to do it for my review of Wes Craven's New Nightmare. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you really enjoyed this video and you have enjoyed my content up to this point, please do me a huge personal favor. Click that subscribe button, and after you click that subscribe button, remember to ring that notification bell. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, have a kick-ass day, and thank you for watching.